Alien is my absolute favorite horror movie series of all time, but I'm not blind to the fact that it's also one of the most controversial and divisive ones out there as well. I mean, if you ask 10 different people to give you their opinion on it, you're gonna get 10 different answers in return. So with the release of Alien Romulus, we now have 9 movies in this franchise, including the crossover films, so it's time to rank these bad boys from worst to best. Today, we're on the hunt for the one true perfect organism, so let's get into it. Coming in at number 9 is Aliens vs. Predator Requiem, the second film in the franchise crossover with Predator. And it's a movie that's so dimly lit that you're gonna think there's a fundamental problem with your television set. If you told me that the guy in charge of doing the lighting on this movie did the entirety of his job with his eyes closed, I'd have to believe you because you cannot see a goddamn thing that's going on here. In all seriousness, a lot of this film's problems all stem off of this one single issue, because you really only come to these two crossover films in the first place to get a bunch of larger-than-life action and see these two formidable creatures face off against one another, and if you're not even given that in an effective manner, you're left to focus on just how much of a mess all the other aspects of the movie really are. All the human characters are so bad, you're gonna be thinking that you're watching a direct-to-DVD slasher sequel like Wrong Turn 9, not a movie with Alien and Predator in it. Some of the stuff they have the Xenomorph doing is unnecessary and disturbing just for the sole reason of creating shock value. And the final nail in the coffin is that the story they went with feels like glorified fan fiction you'd read on an archived sci-fi Reddit page. At this rate, the third entry is going to be about an alien that mutates with the Predator having to face off with an alien that mutates with a Decepticon. Buckle up. Coming in at number 8 is Alien vs. Predator, the first film in the franchise crossover with Predator. And in theory, these movies should work pretty well. I mean, the Xenomorph is known as the perfect organism, and the Predator specializes in hunting the most dangerous game across all universes. Match made in heaven, right? Well, the PG-13 rating here says otherwise. Now, I will admit that this one has a decent chunk more of turn your brain off entertainment that comes along with it. Obviously, the action sequences here are the bread and butter of an entry like this, and they do a decent enough job to come together and offer up perfectly digestible schlock. In my opinion, the last 20 minutes where we see the main character team up with the Predator monster to take down the alien queen does a lot of the heavy lifting to save this one from being a colossal misfire. Definitely a better time than the film that came after it, if not for the sole fact that it's actually watchable, both in that it's semi-entertaining and that you can actually make out what's happening on screen in front of you. But at the end of the day, it's almost just as stupid as its sequel, with much better lighting and characters that aren't impossible to root for. Coming in at number 7 is Alien 3. And if I had to sum up this movie in a single word, it would be frustrating. Because let's be honest here for a second, David Fincher, one of the best directors in the modern era, helming an entry in the Alien franchise sounds like one of the easiest winning combinations of all time from where I'm sitting. But oh boy, did they find a way to make a dog's dinner out of this one. When it comes down to it, my biggest issue with this movie is just how utterly careless and lazy the overall setup is. Not only is it not the best way to continue on Ellen Ripley's story, but it actually goes one unforgivable step further and tarnishes that great ending from Aliens in the process. And look, I don't really blame David Fincher for what happened with this movie because the production was very clearly a complete nightmare from the get-go. I mean, they started filming without a finished script, they paused production halfway through, they scribbled down a random ending to make what they already shot make sense, and then when filming finished, the producers told Fincher to kick rocks and just tore this film to shreds in the editing room any way they saw fit. And that, my friends, is how this little dumpster fire was born. Now, don't get me wrong, a xenomorph running rampant inside a maximum security prison is definitely a scenario that I could get behind, but this movie just doesn't have the juice. Coming in at number 6 is Alien Resurrection. And I have no problem admitting that if the best entries in this franchise are filet mignon from a 5-star restaurant, then this one is a greasy cheeseburger from your local snack bar that'll give you food poisoning. This movie really has a ragtag team feel to it, and whenever you make a movie with that kind of dynamic in mind, you want to make sure you give all of the characters unique traits and roles. You know, maybe you have the leader, the hothead, the scaredy cat, and so on and so forth. Well, this movie definitely has all of that, but all of the performances are so exaggerated and over the top, it becomes very clear very quickly that everybody involved had no idea what tone the movie was supposed to be going for. And these aren't rookie actors. We're talking about Sigourney Weaver, Ron Perlman, Winona Ryder, and a bunch of others. When it comes to the actual plot, playing it safe is not an issue that this movie has, because it probably makes the most wacky and bizarre decisions of the entire franchise. And that's saying something. I mean, Ellen Ripley is a clone now, there's a human xenomorph hybrid stumbling around, the aliens are pretty much treated like zoo animals. There's honestly so many ridiculous things happening in this movie at such a rapid pace that at some point you're kind of just along for the ride. This is definitely big budget slop, but for whatever reason, I don't hate it. Coming in at number 5 is Alien Romulus. And when I heard that Fede Alvarez was going to be the next director in the driver's seat of this franchise, I was very happy with that choice. He's a true professional when it comes to crafting unnerving, disgusting, and claustrophobic horror movies. I mean, the guy holds the record for the most fake blood used in any film ever. That's the kind of sick puppy I want leading the charge here. And he set out to make an entry that perfectly mixes the scares of Alien with the action of Aliens, and I think for the most part he accomplished that goal. Maybe a little bit too well at times though, because it relies heavily on what came before it. Now let me be clear, this movie gets a lot of aspects right. The facehuggers get their time to shine, the performances are solid, the aesthetic is perfect, and like the original, it really feels like a haunted house film set in space. When you boil it down, this might be the most brass tacks and procedural entry in the franchise since the first two films, because it's very light on the world building and the themes in favor of returning the series to its roots with a back against the wall, simple survival story. I wish the xenomorphs were used more effectively and that Fede Alvarez really put his twisted fingerprints all over this thing outside of just the last 20 minutes, but at the end of the day, there's still a lot of fun to be had with this one. Coming in at number 4 is Alien Covenant. Admittedly, nowhere near the top when it comes to character development and cohesive storytelling, but man, is this an absolute buzzsaw of an Alien movie. Now, I'm not gonna lie though, I am a little bit on the fence with this entry when it comes to its actual usage of the xenomorph itself. On the one hand, we finally get to see this beautiful monster in all of its vicious glory in absolutely top-tier CGI, but on the other side of the coin, the vast majority of the action sequences they give us here are in broad daylight, which definitely tones down the intensity and horror a little bit. Regardless, this is probably the xenomorph at its most animalistic and aggressive. I mean, this thing is like if you crossed a full-grown cheetah with a Mack truck. It's taking your face off first and asking questions later. When it comes to the actual story beats, they're kind of in the same vein as Prometheus in the sense that they're pretty open-ended, and I think it's going to be a 50-50 split whether they work for you or not. Me personally, I dug where this story was headed. I want to see more when it comes to these questions of purpose and playing God being explored, and I think it acts as a nice continuation of the film that comes right before it. Most of the characters are pretty much just meat for the grinder and are thinly written, but what's better than having Michael Fassbender in your movie? Having 2 Michael Fassbenders in your movie. Coming in at number 3 is Prometheus. And this is definitely the most philosophical and open-ended entry that we've ever gotten in the Alien franchise. Everybody knows that I absolutely love when a director takes big creative swings for the fences, even if the final product doesn't give me absolutely everything that I wanted out of it. I mean, I'll take that over a safe and by-the-numbers entry every day of the week and twice on Sunday, and that's exactly what Ridley Scott gives us here in his first return to the franchise he created over 40 years ago. The cast of this movie is pretty much next level. I mean, you have Noomi Rapace, Logan Marshall Green, Charlize Theron, Idris Elba, and of course, Michael Fassbender in an absolutely scene-stealing role. He is just addicting as all hell to watch in this film. And on paper, an Alien movie without the alien doesn't really seem like a guaranteed recipe for success, and usually whenever movies try to over-explain the origin of something already established, most of the time, whatever you've spun up in your head is better than whatever makes its way onto the screen. But the ideas rattling around in Ridley Scott's head are so out there and so spacey, you almost just have to appreciate the magnitude of what he's trying to pull off here. Does it give us way more questions than answers? You bet your ass it does. But it also has me pondering life's great mysteries way more than I was expecting to after seeing an Alien film. Coming in at number 2 is Aliens. And I really don't know if there's a better example out there in movie history of a sequel that honors what came before it so well, but that also puts such a distinct feel and twist on the original material to the point that it scratches a completely different itch. It ratchets the intensity up to 11, it furthers the world building of these alien creatures, and it's just the definition of an action movie that's so good to the point that you're gonna get pissed off, because we don't usually get top tier shit like this anymore. The effects are awesome, the characters are all fun as hell, and the stakes couldn't be higher. If you think about it, this could have been an easy and lazy cash grab if it had fallen into the wrong hands. I mean, how many times have we seen a sequel to a successful horror movie where the only change is that there are more monsters this time? But this film does so much legwork to give us all that extra spectacle, but also making sure that it feels earned through attention to Ripley's character development and struggles. Without mincing words, Aliens is one of the most action-packed, memorable, relentless, and just plain badass movies ever made. James Cameron, you are one beautiful bastard. Coming in at number 1 is Alien, the one that started it all and kicked off this franchise with an absolute masterpiece. It's crazy to me that a movie from 1979 continues to be at the top of the food chain and has this level of staying power, but after all these years, it still holds up ridiculously well because it perfectly adopts the less is more approach, only showing the audience what they absolutely need to see, and utilizing very well constructed practical effects allows you to buy into whatever you're seeing on screen and fully immerses you in the terror that's taking place on this dirty-ass freighter. This is really going to come down to your mood and whichever one you've seen more recently at the end of the day, because these first 2 films are both cinematic achievements to the highest degree. But for me personally, whenever I sit down at the dinner table, I prefer a big slab of science fiction with a wicked bit of horror on the side, and Alien is the absolute cream of the crop in that regard. It's a masterclass in creating tension, it's one of the best looking movies I've ever seen, and it introduces us to arguably the scariest monster the genre has ever created. For those reasons, Alien takes the top spot in my franchise ranking, and could very well be my favorite horror movie of all time. So there you have it, guys, my ranking of all 9 movies in the Alien series. Now you know how my list shakes out, but I want to see what yours is. This is a franchise where people are going to have very different opinions, so let me know in the comments below, in what order do you have these bad boys? Don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and I'll see you guys at the next one.